Hello and welcome to part 3 of this time-lapse version of Papi the Chihuahua's tutorial. So in this time-lapse version I am giving you a slightly longer glimpse of everything that we cover in part 3 of the tutorial, so you can see it a tiny bit slower than we normally do. I normally keep these at about 3 minutes long, but I've upped this to 15 minutes just so it's not so fast and you can actually see what's going on. So this tutorial in real life, the real-time version, is about 3.5 hours. So I talk through everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it in real time. I don't cut anything, I don't remove anything, you see absolutely everything that I'm doing. The only time I'll pause the audio is if I'm sharpening a pencil or something, so you don't have to hear it. So what I'm doing here is I'm going in and I'm just putting in the details into this bow tie. So I'm putting in some reds, some pinks, some whites, and those sort of colours used together are creating the lights and the darks to create the three-dimensionalness of this bow tie. So we've got those lovely stripes going through there, so you can see where the light is really shining on them to get the really bright spots, and then you can see where it's a bit darker. So I'm going in and I'm creating the sort of the shadow around the top of the bow tie. So I needed to get quite a depth to this. So I went in with my black and then I've gone over it with the red. And I think I pick up a brown in a minute as well. So I'm using that black to darken up the red tone so that I get that shadow there and it really shows. I'm using a couple of different reds, so I've got more of a pinky tone at the moment because the light was really shining on this, so it's just showing where that light is luminous on the bow tie. And I'm just creating the sort of the creases in the material to make this look like it's got some depth. So I'm just using all the different pencils together and I'm using them to blend in with each other. That's the brown I think I was talking about, just to start to get the shadow in. And as I say, in the real-time tutorial I'm talking through exactly what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So this was a lovely custom bow tie that was made for Papi, so it has his name on it, which is really special because it was one of his mum's favourite bow ties, and he has sadly crossed over the Rainbow Bridge now, so this is a really lovely memory for her to have of him and to have him wearing that lovely bow tie that he wore his whole life. So when you are doing pet portraits, there will sometimes be accessories which are quite special. I mean, he obviously didn't wear this bow tie every day, but he had a selection of bow ties and he was always in a bow tie. And so it's wonderful to have this one that has his name on there to remember him forever. So I'm just going in and I'm starting to put in the white so that we've got that really bright colour in the background so that we don't lose it. And then we can go in over the top of that with other colours, but we wanted to get that vibrancy in first just so that that is there and it really pops and we don't lose that really, really bright tone. So I've gone in with some blacks to sort of do the shadows underneath where, because it's thread, it's upraised from the bow tie, so there will be a bit of a shadow where the light is shining on it. So I've gone in and I've put the black in just to get sort of where the shadow is falling, and then I've gone in with my greys and my pinks just to get the sort of the thread detail in, and I'm going around just to re-establish the red pink of the bow tie around the edges. So I remember I worked on this for quite a long time just to make sure that I got it right and just make sure that, you know, it looked like the actual bow tie. Something like this it's quite important because it's obviously a very special accessory, so you want to make sure that it actually does look like it. So I've just moved the glassine over so that I'm not leaning on the page, and I'm just starting to get in that chest hair that's coming out underneath and on top of the bow tie. I couldn't obviously get the hair under the chin in before I did the bow tie because it overlaps over the top of it. So that is something I talk about quite often in pet portrait tutorials, is that you need to think about the order in which you're seeing things to establish the order in which you put it down onto the page. Because obviously we needed to overlap these hairs, so we needed the bow tie in first before we could therefore put them in. So I've gone in with quite vibrant colours with the white, and I'm using the sort of the very light greys. That's the Stabilo 700 there that I'm using. It's quite a warm toned grey, and then the sort of the light yellows and the burnt ochres and the saffrons and all those sorts of tones. And then there is a bit of a green reflection in there, so I'm using a bit of green as well and some grey. I will obviously, in the real-time tutorial, be talking through exactly why I've made these colour choices. I narrate as I draw, so I tell you exactly everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it. So you literally hear my thought process as I'm drawing. So what I'm doing here is I'm just putting in the background a bit more. So that is that lovely green tone that his mum asked to have in there. And I'm using the soft pastels for that, as well as using the soft pastels to get in the base layer of his body. So one of the brilliant things about this portrait, and a great way of teaching, is that it's got the white and the black overlapping fur. And I think this can look quite scary, to be honest, when you first start doing pet portraits, or even when you've been doing it for a while. When you have these completely contrasting colours next to each other, it can look very, very daunting to figure out how to put them in and what you're going to do. But actually, what I talk through in this tutorial is exactly how I put these colours in so that they don't get muddy and they don't start to look awful next to each other. So what I'm doing is I've put in all my sort of my colours that I can see. There's sort of purpley tones there in the white and the grey. And I can see some yellow tones, some white tones, some cream. And so I've put in all of that lovely base layer. And then I'm starting to go in with my black pencil. It doesn't really matter what black you use. I favoured the 199 Faber-Castell for this one. And I'm starting to just get in the detail of the direction in which those hairs are going. And then I can gradually build this up as I go. So I'm going in with the dark scene purple now and a blue-grey tone just to start to get in this area here on the left-hand side. And then you can see I'm using some lighter greys, again, light grey but like a blue tone to it. And then a really, really bright grey there. And then I'm going into that grey with the black as well. So I'm just constantly making sure that these layers look like they go together, like they're soft, and like they're not really contrasting each other. So I'm going in under the bow tie now. You've sort of seen that I used some blue, and I'm using some blue greys and some purple, and I'm just creating the idea that that shadow is there beneath the bow tie. And then I'm using some warmer greys where the light is slightly different in the middle of the chest. Now, something that was a bit different about this portrait is I drew the body from a couple of different photos. So the favourite photograph that his mum had was the one where he was wearing the bow tie. But you couldn't see the body in that photo because it had been cut off at the bottom. So it was a square photo that I was working from, and you couldn't see his actual body. But I'd been given other photographs where you could see his body. So I combined a few different photographs together to get this whole portrait. So it's something I talked about in this tutorial. It was a case of having to work out what the light would be doing as a whole on this portrait had it been one photo rather than using different light from different photographs, and it looking potentially a bit strange because it could look like you had different light sources coming from all over the place. And I do often talk about light and establishing our lights and our darks because obviously you need to get that in place. You need to get those tonal values to be able to actually get that three-dimensional appearance, because the detail of course is very important, but you have to get that depth there to be able to then see that this is a three-dimensional image for the detail to actually matter. Because if you don't get that depth there, then the detail won't matter. Quite often say this when putting in lighter colours. If you don't have something darker for it to sit on in the background, then it really doesn't show particularly well. So you will have noticed I've just been gradually building up my colours to those sort of lighter tones, and then I am going in between with some darker tones as well, just re-establishing where those sort of darker shadows are as I go. And I used a silicone tool there just to blend it all in and soften it out slightly. So there's several tools that you can use for it. You can use your finger, you can use a cotton wool bud, you can use the silicone tool. There are so many different things that you can use, and it's just really finding personal preference, what works best for you. So what I'm doing at the moment is I'm putting in some grass strands. I wanted to get these in there because I wanted him to sit on top of something. It looked a bit strange if he was just sort of falling off of the bottom of the page, because all of the photographs that she had of him, you could see this lovely sort of long grass at the bottom of the photo, and it seemed to be the way that she'd always captured him on camera. So it was something I wanted to include, but I wanted to include it as sort of not a really strong detail. It was sort of more of a blurry, out of focus effect, just to have it in there rather than to make it really pop, because we didn't want to take the focus away from him. So it's just the idea of grass rather than it being really detailed grass. So again, I'm just going in and I'm putting in the base layers for the fur on the right hand side. I remember I got really hung up on this area on the right hand side, trying to get it absolutely perfect, because there are lots of changes in colour tone and there's a lot going on, and actually most of it's sitting behind the grass, so I didn't need to go so mad on it, but you do still want that detail to show, even though it is sat behind something else, because it will affect the overall appearance of the piece. So I'm just using my cotton wool bud just to rub the soft pastel layers in. So again, I've got my blacks and I've got my purples and my whites. And there's also some beige and some brown sort of umber ochre tones over here. And there's a bit of green there as well, where it's obviously, it's reflecting where that shade is, where the shadow is, where he's sat in the grass. So I'm just getting that in first, and I'm going in with my sort of warm greys and my purple tones and my greens, just to get that sort of shadow effect in. And then I'm going in and I'm getting in the yellows and the browns around this bit of the fur. We've got that slightly different colour. And again, going in with my black and then my brown again. I'm starting off with my darker colours first, and then I'm gradually working towards the lighter colours. And again, when this is in real time, I explain which pencil I'm picking up, why I'm picking it up, exactly what I'm doing. So I'm just using the silicone tool there again, just to blend this all in. And I'm going in and out and just making sure that I've got the sort of the right combination of colours there. And like I say, I did got a bit hung up on this bit, making sure that it sort of looked right, because I was working from a few different photographs. And it is hard when you're working from several different photographs to make sure that something does look correct when you've sort of mocked it up from a few different things. You're not 100% certain that it does actually look right. Because, you know, you've not met that dog in person, but it ended up looking really lovely. So it all worked out absolutely fine. It's another reason why it's important to send mock-ups to clients as well, because you need to make sure that they approve what you can see that it's going to look like. So you do need to sort of have that idea in their heads of, this is what I'm doing, this is what you're going to get at the end, just so you don't get that disappointment, you know, when the portrait's finished. You want to make sure that they know sort of what to expect at the end. And so what I'm doing is I'm just building up these layers. I'm just going from dark to light, and I use the darker colours to first of all create sort of a map, like a guideline, a road map, whatever you want to think of it of, a sat nav, you know, just to give you an idea of the direction in which the hairs are going, so that you've then got something to build on top of. And obviously creating lots of different layers is going to give you more of an appearance of a realism there, because the light's going to shine on it and you're going to get all these lovely colours reflected in there. So it won't harm to have some extra colours, some extra layers in there. So I'm just starting to blend in where the white tones are there going into the black tones. And as you'll see, the way that we've done this, and we've got this sort of crossover colour between the two, they look like they're really beautifully going into each other rather than awkwardly sitting on top of each other or starting to look really muddy. So that's one of the things that was really fun to do in this tutorial, and to sort of walk everyone through, is exactly how you achieve this without it getting dirty, really. And as you can see, it really started to pop, and that's when I get excited when I'm doing drawings like this, when you can start to see as you've been building up those colours, because it does look ugly for a bit, you know, as you build the layers on top of each other, there is this ugly phase. And then you get to the end of it and you've got these lovely bright highlights, and it all starts to come together and you can see where the light's shining, and it just looks really lovely. So this is just putting in that grass detail at the bottom. As I said, the grass is going over the top of where I was sort of hung up on the details. So those details didn't matter too much really in that corner, but you can see them through the grass, so it does still matter and it does still need to be there, because it's still really important, because you can see through those grass blades. They're not solid, so you do need to be able to see that he's behind them. It is really important, because then that gives it more of that element of realism. I'm just using that silicone tool there again. It's one of my favourite tools just for making things a bit softer and blending things out. And then just finishing off the right hand side. I left this to last because I didn't want to lean on it or ruin it, so I thought it was better to get everything underneath done first and then move over to the very right hand side and just get this final sort of bit in. So I hope this has been helpful and give you an insight into how I do my tutorials. I do have this very sort of chatty style while I draw. I explain everything that I'm doing, but I also sort of talk you through other elements of being a pet portrait artist and the various things that go into that. So I really hope this is helpful. I would love to see you over on my Patreon channel for the real-time tutorial. So as I say, this section of it, part 3, is 3.5 hours long, but the whole tutorial is around 9 hours. So it's split into 3 parts, and I talk you through exactly what I've done every step of this tutorial so that you can draw along and create your own version of Papi. I supply all the line art and reference photos, and I would love to see you over there and to see what you create. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.